All right, let's jump into a really wild time in history, 1054 to 1305. I mean, this is when the Western world was basically forged in fire and faith. You've got these incredible cathedrals reaching for the heavens, but at the same time, you've got these brutal holy wars. You've got mind-bending philosophy and the absolute, unshakable power of the Pope. It's an era packed with contradictions, and honestly, it's what set the stage for the world we know today. Yeah, and this phrase, holy wars and high-powered popes, I mean, it just nails it, right? It's the perfect summary for this whole era. It really captures the two massive forces that were constantly pulling and pushing against each other. On one side, you have this huge, explosive burst of religious energy pouring outwards. That's the Crusades. And then on the other side, you've got this intense internal battle for who's really in charge, led by some of the most powerful and ambitious popes you can imagine. Okay, so let's dig into that internal power struggle first. This was a clash of titans, really. It all boiled down to one single massive question. Who's the real boss on Earth? Is it the king, the guy who rules the land and the armies? Or is it the Pope, the guy who rules your immortal soul? And this wasn't some polite debate, you know. It was a radical, in-your-face declaration of power from the popes. Take Pope Gregory VII. He literally wrote it all down in a document, get this, called the Dictatus Papae. And he wasn't just saying the Pope was equal to kings. No way. He was claiming the Pope's power came straight from God, which gave him the right to fire, to depose any king or emperor he thought wasn't doing a good job. So the flashpoint for all this, the thing they were really fighting over, was something called lay investiture. It sounds complicated, but it's pretty simple. Who gets to pick the bishops? Kings were like, hey, this is my kingdom, I get to choose. But the Pope fired back, nope, these are church officials, only I can appoint them. And you gotta understand, this was a huge deal. Bishops weren't just religious figures, they controlled enormous amounts of land and money. So whoever controlled the bishops, well, they pretty much controlled the kingdom. And believe me, the popes had some heavy-duty weapons to back up their claims. We're talking spiritual nukes here. At the peak of this power, a guy like Pope Innocent III could hit a king with excommunication. That meant you were kicked out of the church. For people back then, that was terrifying. It basically meant your soul was damned to hell. But even scarier was the interdict. With that, the Pope could shut down every single church in an entire country. No weddings, no funerals, no baptisms, nothing. It was a way to turn the king's own people against him. And it worked. He brought powerful rulers, like King John of England, completely to their knees with this stuff. So while all this internal drama is unfolding, this epic struggle for power, it's also setting the stage for the most famous and, frankly, the most violent explosion of religious energy of the entire era, the Crusades. Okay, so picture this. It's 1095. Pope Urban II gets up and gives this incredible sermon. He calls on all the knights of Europe to march east to go and reclaim the Holy Land. And the response? It was absolutely electric. He lit a fire that would burn for the next 200 years. The cry went up everywhere, Deus vult, God wills it. But what was really going on here? Why did tens of thousands of people drop everything to answer this call? Well, the truth is it was a really complicated mix of reasons. For sure, a lot of people were genuinely religious. They truly believed they were doing God's work by freeing Jerusalem from those they called infidels. But let's be real, there was a lot more to it. There was the promise of treasure, of new lands to rule. There was the sheer thrill of adventure and the chance to make a name for yourself. And maybe the biggest motivator of all? The Pope offered a golden ticket, a plenary indulgence, basically a get-out-of-hell-free card. He promised that if you went on crusade, every sin you had ever committed would be completely forgiven. That's a powerful incentive. But this noble idea of a holy war, well, it got corrupted. Fast. The best, or I guess the worst example of this is the Fourth Crusade. This is just a disaster. Instead of heading to the Holy Land to fight Muslims, these crusaders get sidetracked by greed and politics. And they end up attacking and brutally sacking, wait for it, Constantinople, the biggest Christian city in the world. Even the Pope who launched it, Innocent III, was completely horrified by what they did. So after all that bloodshed, what was the results? Well, here's the crazy part. In terms of their actual goals, the Crusades were mostly a failure. They didn't hold on to the Holy Land for long. And they were supposed to heal the rift between the Eastern and Western churches? Nope, they made it way, way worse. But the unintended consequences, those were huge. It created this deep-seated bitterness between Christians and Muslims that has lasted for centuries. It helped break down the old feudal system back in Europe. And get this, it ironically made the popes who started the whole thing even more powerful and prestigious. Okay, so while all these literal battles are raging across the Middle East, there's another kind of crusade happening back in Europe. This one was a battle for the mind. It's the birth of the university system as we know it, and this new intellectual movement called scholasticism. Now, scholasticism is a fascinating idea. These thinkers weren't trying to discover new truths. As far as they were concerned, the truth was already figured out. It was in the Bible, it was in the teachings of the church. Their whole project was to take the writings of ancient thinkers like Aristotle, all his logic and reason, and use those tools to organize and prove that Christian faith wasn't just something you felt, it was something that made perfect, logical sense. And right at the center of all this was this huge debate. It really boiled down to two different approaches. On one side, you have guys like Peter Abelard. His motto was basically, I know in order to believe. For him, you had to doubt, you had to ask questions, because that's how you get to the truth. But on the other side, you have thinkers like Anselm of Canterbury. His philosophy was the total opposite. I believe in order to know. He said you had to start with faith. You can't even begin to understand God until you first believe. Now, while all this high-level debate was happening in the new universities, you had these two new religious orders that were taking faith back to the common people, but in totally different ways. First, you have the Franciscans. They followed St. Francis of Assisi and appealed to the heart. Their message was all about poverty, humility, and love. Then you have the Dominicans. They were the intellectuals, the debaters. They appealed to the mind. Their job was to defend church teaching with logic and reason, often against ideas they considered heresy. Think of the great Thomas Aquinas. He was a Dominican. So let's bring it all together. When you look back at this whole era of incredible power and unbelievable violence, what's the big takeaway? Well, it turns out that the most important legacies were the ones nobody saw coming. This period planted the seeds for a world its inhabitants would never have recognized. Okay, so legacy number one is this giant paradox. The papacy reaches the absolute peak of its power. I mean, they're on top of the world. But that very success, all the money, all the political games, all the bossing around of kings, it started to create some serious resentment. People started to get tired of it. And that resentment, it would eventually explode into the Protestant Reformation. Then there's legacy number two, another paradox. The Crusades, right? By their own military goals, they pretty much failed. But in failing, they accidentally reconnected Europe with the East. And all of a sudden, you've got this new flood of trade, technology, and ideas coming in. This helped jumpstart Europe's economy, it weakened the old feudal system, and it basically paved the way for the modern countries we know today. And the final paradox is an intellectual one. This whole movement of scholasticism. It built this incredible logical fortress around Catholic doctrine. It was the best defense the church ever had. But by making human reason and logic the star of the show, it also handed people the very tools they would eventually use to start picking that fortress apart, to question and challenge the church's total authority. At the end of the day, this whole era is just a massive lesson in unintended consequences. It proves that when you have incredibly powerful institutions and super passionate ideas, they can change the world in ways that nobody, and I mean nobody, could have ever predicted. So it kind of leaves you with a big question, right? What are the holy wars and the high-powered popes of our own time? What are the powerful, unshakable forces shaping our world today? And what unforeseen results are they going to have down the line?